Welcome back, friends. This is Marty, and today I have a new build for you. This build is mainly focused around crits and 2 projectiles using a bow. All gameplay recorded is from a Champion plus 1 dungeon, and regarding to the playstyle here, we are marking up enemies with Mark of Impurity to make them more vulnerable to our attack and to let this mark spread to new targets as enemies fall. We have our boss nuke ability Gunslinger's Brand in place, and Arrow's Veil for AOE damage, and Phantom Blades for teleport abilities as well, plus the auto turret as an oh shit runaway damage ability. Now, so how do we get these abilities to deal actual damage? Well, let's start with the numbers this time. Well, it's about crit damage and crit chance and scaling along with 9% to every 100 unspent rage points. Our Gunslinger's Brand, for example, damage also scales here increasingly every time we hit an enemy with it. So let's say on a boss fight, every time you hit with Gunslinger's Brand, your crit gets higher and higher, like a stricken effect gem, just like in Diablo 3, if you know about this. Now, if your attack do miss, then the buff falls off. There's one downside to it, but the rotation for the boss fights are then use Mark of Impurity and blast the boss multiple times with Gunslinger's Brand. If the heat gets too much here, guys, place down the auto turret and teleport away using your Phantom Blades. From far away then, use Arrow's Veil for instant AoE damage, dodge attacks with your stamina points and the roll ability if need be, and then continue to repeat this rotation, guys. As for the potions, I am using 1 healing potion and 1 rage potion. So let's take a look at the active skills now. First is Mark of Impurity with the modifiers Big Game Hunting, Target Eliminated, Minimal Resistance, and the major modifier Guild by Association. All these combined will weaken the single target and on death spread marks to other targets as well, and targets are more likely to become critical hit and afflicted by stasis or even frozen. Next up here we have our boss killer ability, our highest hitting ability in this build, Gunslinger's Brand, starting with the modifier Anti-Siege Ammunition, Hipfire Headshots, Inorganic Partnership, and with the major modifier Order Through Chaos, granting us increased crit, increased damage, the ability to choose targets with the mouse, and finally the damage scaling that Order Through Chaos gives of us for each time we hit the boss. Now, this ability can crit for more than 20k damage, which is pretty damn awesome if you ask me. Next up we have Arrow's Veil with the modifiers here Fluid Movement, Force Bow, Eagle Eye, and the major modifier the Black Cloud. We ensure instant AoE damage, reduced cooldown, more base damage, and a higher chance to inflict critical hits. I've seen even about 18k crits and 25k crits as well from this ability. Now, next up we have Phantom Blades. Here I have chosen these modifiers Vorpal Blades, Blade Slinger, Thick Edges, and the major cut. And the major one here, Cut Through the Ether, for increased damage and area of effect, and also gaining 1 extra charge and the option to teleport to the projectile location on recast. This ability crits for about 15k and covers a big area with blades on use as well, so it has a huge hit circle along with this ability. Now, last here is the Avenger Auto Turret using the modifiers Self-Destruct Protocol and 2 majors, the first one being Punisher Lightning Cannon and autonomous sensors, making the cannon explode when it expires, dealing around 10k crits on nearby targets. I call this a free AOE damage ability happening without you having to click anything, which is awesome. Besides, we're getting also the lightning damage output from the cannon that gives a chance of enemies being afflicted with shock, and last, the auto aim feature, and I just think it's completely nice to have this right. All in all, some really strong skills with some high crit damage outputs, and just along when you're using your normal attack ability, you have two projectiles as well, and that works out pretty nicely when building up rage here. So. As for points retribution, spent about 120 points into wisdom and the rest into ferocity. This way we end up having about 25 to 30% chance to inflict ailments, in this case either stasis that cripples the enemies or frozen that freezes them. Our bow will control what kind of ailments that will be inflicted on the targets. Let's take a dive into the gear. For defensive gems, use the green ones for dodge chance. If you dodge, you resist the damage 100%, so it's really good. In this build, we're using Sanish stash rings for damage, 50 points to all attributes and movement speed. If you haven't got these rings, get rings with critical chance, critical damage, damage added to attacks or spells, attack damage, and a support gem slot for ferocity. Head item is the Bloodlust Bruiser helmet, mainly for ferocity and the critical hit damage, but the rage regen is also very important. Boots are the unique frayed combat cleats with 34 agility and 15% movement speed, and extra stamina points. For the gloves, get as much ferocity, crit and attack speed as possible for max damage. Belt here, we need critical hit chance, critical damage, damage added to attacks, gem slot for a ferocity support gem, amulet with ferocity and a gem slot for 20 ferocity more. Damage added to attacks or spells, material damage and critical hit score. Chest piece with 7 or more % damage for every 100 unspent rage. This, by the way, is also possible to get on helmets by, doing the Wrath of Sarasol dungeons. You can get it on a head slot as well, which is really powerful. Shoulders, Envoy of War, granting us more attack damage and rage regeneration. Try to get shoulders here with material damage, attack speed and cost reduction if possible. Legs are granting us dodge and block chance with any weapon, but also cooldown reduction. This is good for Arrow's Whale in this build. Some health regen, toughness and resistances as well. For the bow, I am using a 3-socket legendary bow with either damage gems inside to be able to afflict stasis to the enemies. I also have a spare bow with 2 sockets that I also use sometimes. This is an elemental bow that does frost damage and can freeze enemies, which is very powerful. No matter the bow, make sure you get an ailment that can either stun, freeze or do stasis on the targets, because this gives you 25% more damage on the targets because of a point spent in the passive skill tree that we will take a look at a bit later here. On the bow you will also need life leech, critical hit damage, plus damage to attacks, critical hit chance or attack speed. Okay, so here we are taking a look at the passive skill tree, guys. Now one of the most important ones, I would say, of the major nodes here are the extra projectile that we get. I know that it's removing 60% of all projectile damage, but it's still worth it to have the extra projectile, because we're also able to then pick up the extra crit damage here and the extra critical hit chance score for the projectiles as well. Now, one of the important ones as well is this one called Persistence Hunting, because what this does is that it grants you 25% extra damage to enemies with impaired movement, such as slowed with stasis, stunned, or frozen. So this is what I was talking about with the bow, right? You need to get a bow that can either stun or do stasis or freeze the enemies to gain this 25% damage buff, which is really important when you're facing bosses and stuff like that, okay? And here, when I'm using the bow with stasis, then I'm choosing this point here with stasis chance score on either damage. And if I use my other bow with the freeze, then I choose the other point. Then I change the setup for the other bow, and I choose the other point here to get the extra freeze chance on the frost damage, okay? So this is some of the really important stuff for this build. Now, picking up 2 extra % damage here per 100% rage point, and unspent rage point, I mean, sorry, and just picking up the ferocity down here, picking up some of the cold stats here on the way when building this, picking up all the crit from the soldier tree here and the toughness here, and then moving over here in the assassin to get some attack speed and some crit chance, and then a whole lot of critical hit damage from here right now. So this is the setup that I made, and by the way guys, Wolcen is coming out soon, and as you can see we got 12 blank tiles here, and here we're going to see the new classes come up that you can pick, and hopefully something with the apocalyptic forms as well. And I can't wait to see the finished Gate of Fates passive skill tree once it releases. But anyways guys, this was the build for today. I hope you liked it, and I will just see you in my next video for even more build guides. Peace out. See you later.